Welcome back to Horror Month, and this is the Box Office Maniacs, and I am bringing you a brand new movie that just came out directly from Netflix. Now, a lot of times you hear, straight to Netflix, straight to DVD, and you're like, oh, it's going to be terrible because it's coming straight to the Netflix or, bypassing the theater. But actually, a lot of times now, it doesn't matter, because a lot of times the stuff that comes on Netflix is better than half the stuff in the movies. And what I'm talking about today is Stephen King's new adaptation called Gerald's Game. Now, I never actually read this book, but I do remember when it first came out, and it always kind of fascinated me, and I always wanted to read it. But I think like a lot of people, when it first came out, you were thinking, oh, another Misery. Why did he write another Misery? But, I didn't really know what the story was. I knew it was about some woman, and she was chained to a bed, and she couldn't get off the bed. She was stuck on the bed. So I've always wondered to myself, how could you write a story about that? How could you fill an entire novel about a person laying in bed who's handcuffed to a bed? I mean, it's like, where would the plot go exactly? I never really understood that. So when this came on, I was really looking forward to it, because I finally got the opportunity to see what this thing was about and how it could fill an entire novel and an hour-and-a-half movie about a woman chained to the bed. And it did, and it did it spectacularly. Once again, another great adaptation from Stephen King. Although, like I said, I never read the book, but watching the movie, I am actually going to go back and read the book now, because I kind of want to read about the missing parts, because I'm sure there's a lot of parts that didn't make it into this movie, and I really just kind of am fascinated by the whole story now, because it was so good. Alright, so for those who don't know what Gerald's Game is it's basically this couple goes out, and they're kind of rich couple, and they go out to this cabin, or more like a big house that's not really even a cabin, out in the woods by themselves, and the husband wanted to go out there to get kind of, kinky with his wife. And this is kind of an older couple. And they get out there, and he ends up handcuffing her to the bedpost. So then, of course, he starts advancing on her, and she starts freaking out, because I guess this was like a long-time fetish of his, and she didn't even know anything about it. So she's like, uncuff me, and she starts freaking out about the whole thing. Then, of course, the guy has a heart attack and dies and falls on the floor. So now the story becomes, okay, now I'm just going to sit here and watch this woman handcuffed to a bed for an hour. But there's so much more that goes on in the story here. And this was very much Hitchcockian. I mean, it was very much an Alfred Hitchcock movie. I think if Alfred Hitchcock was alive now, this would have been a movie that he would want to have made himself. Because basically the entire film takes place pretty much in that one bedroom. And you're thinking, how can that be interesting? How can you sit there and watch that for an hour and a half? But what they do with it is they make it interesting, because she goes into her head, basically, and starts having flashbacks to when she's a kid. And stuff that happened, not really good stuff, happened to her when she was young. Plus, she kind of starts going psychotic a little bit, and, or a lot maybe, and she sees her dead husband talking to her, and then she sees herself talking to her. So you have like these two illusions in the room constantly talking to her about, this and that and her childhood, and it's just really so well done. And the acting is just excellent. Absolutely fantastic acting from this. I definitely would say it's even Emmy quality. I hope the Emmys recognize this next year, because both these actors are incredible in this. And mostly it's just the woman who basically kind of carries this entire film. The other thing I was kind of wondering is it a horror film, or is it more of a psychological horror film? And to tell you the truth, I think it's pretty much both. I mean, really, how horrifying would it be to be chained to a bed with nobody around for 100 miles, and you can't get loose, and you have your dead husband laying down there on the floor? And it even gets worse, But yeah, it is gross. They don't really pull back any punches in this. I mean, they really show everything. I mean, really, they do literally show everything. It's gross. It's really gross. But that's okay, because that's kind of, I'm assuming, what the novel was. The novel's probably even worse than this. And then something really cool happens in the movie that, you know, you kind of don't expect is, and it's a little spoiler here, but it happens towards the beginning of the movie. But basically, she sees death in the bedroom, and he comes walking out of the shadows, and it's really creepy, and she keeps seeing him in the bedroom, but then you start thinking to yourself, is this a real person, or is this her imagination, or what? And it starts becoming a pretty creepy. That whole sequence with that character in the bedroom is really great. Super, super creepy. They did a fantastic job with that. So, by the end of the movie, it gets really graphic. It gets really, really graphic. And I'm not going to go into detail. I'm not going to spoil anything for you. But I'm sitting there watching this, and I'm like, oh my God! Holy crap! And my wife is in the other room, because she didn't want to see it. She read the book, but after reading the book, she's like, well, I can't actually watch that. Which I guess I can kind of see after watching what happens. But yeah, I mean, it freaked me out. And I don't get freaked out that often watching horror or gore or anything like that. But wow, I mean, I guess I wasn't expecting how far they were going to push, you know, the gore in this. But holy cow, it gets bad towards the end of it. So just, you know, a warning for those people who are squeamish, you might pass out. Just to let you know, it gets that bad. But the conclusion to the entire movie is awesome. It's so great. It's fantastic. It's better than I ever thought, you know, that a movie with a woman chained to a bed for an hour and a half could ever possibly be. All these people are finally figuring out, hey, let's adapt a Stephen King novel. Let's actually do something great here, and people will like it, and people will watch it, and we will make money, unlike The Dark Tower. And things like that, or things that they've done in the past, now they've seen the success of it, they're like, oh, hey, maybe we should follow the book, The Mist, and make it just like the book, The Mist, and people will really enjoy it, and we will make a lot of money, unlike The Mist. So yeah, overall, this was an outstanding movie, and if you're a Stephen King fan, and you're like myself, never read this book, and you've always been curious about it, watch it tonight. Sit down, you won't be disappointed. Be warned, it does get really gross, it does get really graphic, but it's worth it. I mean, sitting there watching the acting and the performances and seeing what this woman's going through and trying to put yourself in her mental state. So, overall, I am giving Gerald's Game for this 2017 Horror Month a big ol' 5 out of 5. And I'll say this too, that, you know, if this wasn't Stephen King, and if it was just some random guy who wrote this, and some random people who made it, and Stephen King had nothing to do with it, this would absolutely be called torture porn. Because that's kind of what is going on in this movie. A lot, anyway. And it is. It's one of the few torture porn films that really work. And I haven't seen a torture porn film in a long time. Not since probably Hostel 3, I think, is the last one I watched, which was quite a while ago. And I really hate that terminology. I can't stand the word torture porn, which really came out of the Hostel films and the Saw films. And it's kind of disappeared. You don't ever see that, and you don't really hear about it anymore, thank God, because I wasn't a big fan of the word. But yeah, that's what this movie is, for the most part. But it's excellent. So if you want to be creeped out and just be mentally unstable for the rest of the week, turn this on and watch it on Netflix, because I think you guys are going to love it. All of you Maniacs out there are amazing, and we're just getting started here with Horror Month. I cannot wait to bring you all this stuff all month long. It's going to be so exciting. I hope you guys tune in. Tell your friends, tell your relatives, tell the undead, tell any ghosts that may be haunting your house, tell your pets, tell everybody. It's Horror Month. It's Box Office Maniacs.